1 month after childbirth, my wife walked out on me and our daughter without a word. Desperate for answers, I searched her diary and found a shocking confession. 5 years later, she returns with her boyfriend, wanting to play happy family with our daughter. But I tell her she can't because she was not there all these years. I 35M never saw it coming. One moment we were a happy family of 3, my wife, our newborn daughter, and me. The next, I was a single father, struggling to make sense of a world turned upside down. It happened exactly 1 month after our daughter's birth. I came home from work, arms full of groceries and a small bouquet of flowers. A surprise for my wife, who I knew was struggling with the adjustment to motherhood. But when I opened the door, the house was eerily quiet. At first, I thought they might be napping. But as I moved through the rooms, calling out softly, a sense of dread began to creep over me. In the nursery, I found our daughter asleep in her crib, peaceful and unaware. But my wife was nowhere to be found. Her car was gone from the driveway. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Hours passed, then days, with no word. I was frantic, torn between caring for our newborn and trying to unravel the mystery of my wife's disappearance. The police were sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. There was no sign of foul play, they said. Adults have the right to leave if they choose. But I couldn't accept that. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, she wouldn't just walk away. Would she? As days turned to weeks, I was forced to face the unthinkable truth. She had left us, voluntarily, without a word of explanation or goodbye. I was devastated, angry, and utterly lost. How could I raise a child on my own? How could I explain to our daughter, when she was old enough to ask, why her mother had abandoned her? In my desperation for answers, I did something I'm not proud of. I searched through my wife's things, hoping to find some clue, some explanation for her sudden departure. That's when I found her diary, hidden in the back of her closet. I hesitated, knowing I was violating her privacy, but the need to understand overpowered my guilt. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read. What I found shook me to my core. Page after page detailed her growing resentment towards motherhood, her feelings of being trapped and overwhelmed. But it was the entry from the day before she left that truly broke my heart. I can't do this anymore. I never wanted to be a mother. I thought I could change. That maternal instinct would kick in once the baby was born. But it hasn't. Every cry, every sleepless night, every moment of this new life feels like a prison sentence. I love you, but I can't live this lie anymore. I have to get out before I suffocate, before I do something I'll regret even more than leaving. I sat there, stunned, as the truth sank in. All our talks about starting a family, all her excitement during the pregnancy. Had it all been an act? How could I have been so blind? The next few years were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless questions from well-meaning friends and family. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, determined that my daughter would never feel the absence of her mother's love. It wasn't easy. There were moments of overwhelming loneliness, times when I longed for a partner to share the joys and challenges of parenthood. But watching my daughter grow, hearing her first words, seeing her first steps, it filled a void I didn't even know existed. As she got older, the inevitable questions began. Daddy, why don't I have a mommy like other kids? It broke my heart every time, but I always tried to answer honestly, in a way her young mind could understand. Your mommy loved you very much, I'd say, but sometimes grown-ups have big problems that make it hard for them to be good parents. She wanted you to have the best life possible, so she made sure you stayed with me. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all I could bear to tell her. I didn't want her to carry the weight of feeling unwanted or abandoned. Life went on. My daughter thrived, growing into a bright, curious, and loving child. I dated occasionally, but never seriously. The betrayal still felt too raw, and my focus was entirely on being there for my little girl. Then, 5 years to the day after she left, my wife reappeared as suddenly as she had vanished. I was in the backyard, pushing our daughter on the swing set, when I heard the doorbell. Thinking it was a delivery, I called out that we'd be there in a minute. But when we rounded the corner of the house, I stopped dead in my tracks. There she was, standing on our porch as if no time had passed at all. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She'd lost weight. But those eyes, the ones I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, were the same. Next to her stood a man I didn't recognize, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. They both smiled as we approached, as if this were a normal social call and not the return of a long-lost mother. "Hi," she said softly, her eyes fixed on our daughter. "You've gotten so big." I felt my little girl press against my leg, suddenly shy in the face of these strangers. "Who are they, Daddy?" she whispered. Before I could answer, my wife, ex-wife, I reminded myself, spoke again. "I'm your mommy, sweetie. I've come back to see you." I felt a surge of anger so powerful, it nearly knocked me off my feet. How dare she? How dare she waltz back into our lives after 5 years of silence and claim the title of mommy as if she had any right to it? "We need to talk," I managed to say through gritted teeth. "Inside, now." I ushered my daughter into the house, asking her to go play in her room for a bit. Then I turned to face the woman who had shattered our family, and the man who now stood beside her. "What are you doing here?" I demanded once we were alone in the living room. She had the grace to look ashamed, at least. I I wanted to see her, to explain. I've been in therapy, working through my issues. I realize now what a terrible mistake I made." Her companion chimed in, his voice annoyingly cheerful. "We thought it was time to reconnect, maybe start building a relationship. Kids need their mothers after all." I stared at them, incredulous. "A relationship? You think you can just walk back in after 5 years and play happy family?" My ex-wife reached out, trying to take my hand. I pulled away as if her touch burned. "I know I hurt you," she said softly. "Both of you, but I'm better now. I want to make things right." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up anger, hurt, and resentment came pouring out. "Make things right? You abandoned your 1-month-old daughter without a word. Do you have any idea what that did to her? To me?" I saw the shock on their faces, but I couldn't stop. "I read your diary," I confessed. "I know you never wanted to be a mother. That's fine. That was your choice to make. But you made it 5 years too late." My ex-wife's eyes filled with tears. "I was sick," she pleaded. "I had postpartum depression. I wasn't thinking clearly. And in 5 years, you couldn't pick up a phone, send a letter, anything to let us know you were alive." I shook my head, disgust rising in my throat. "No, you don't get to come back now and claim to be her mother. You weren't there for her first word, her first step, her first day of school. You weren't there to comfort her when she had nightmares or celebrate when she learned to ride a bike." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I'm glad you've gotten help. I truly am. But you can't undo the past 5 years. You can't erase the pain and confusion you caused our daughter." Her boyfriend stepped forward, his face set in a patronizing expression. "Now, let's be reasonable here. Everyone deserves a second chance. Think about what's best for the child." I rounded on him, my voice low and dangerous. "What's best for my daughter is stability, love, consistency, all things her mother chose to deny her. You don't get to walk in here and tell me what's best for my child when you've been in her life for all of 5 minutes. Turning back to my ex-wife, I softened my tone slightly. "I'm not saying you can never see her, but it has to be on her terms, when she's old enough to understand and make that choice for herself. And it won't be as her mother. That ship has sailed." I could see the pain in her eyes, but I steeled myself against it. "You made your choice 5 years ago. Now you have to live with the consequences." With that, I showed them to the door. As they left, my ex-wife turned back one last time. "I really am sorry," she whispered. I nodded, acknowledging her words, but not accepting them. "Goodbye," I said firmly, closing the door on the past. As I turned back to the house, I heard my daughter's small voice from the top of the stairs. "Daddy, are you okay?" I climbed the stairs and gathered her in my arms, holding her close. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be just fine." And in that moment, I knew it was true. We had weathered the storm of abandonment and come out stronger on the other side. Our little family of 2 was complete, bound by a love that no absence could diminish. As we sat together that evening, reading stories and laughing, I realized that sometimes the family you choose, the one you fight for and nurture every day, is far more precious than the one you're born into, or the one society tells you you should have. My ex-wife's return had stirred up old wounds, but it had also reaffirmed what I'd known all along. Being a parent isn't about biology. It's about being there, day in and day out, through the good times and the bad. It's about unconditional love and unwavering support. And as I tucked my daughter into bed that night, her small hand clasping mine, I knew that no matter what challenges life might throw our way, we would face them together. because that's what real family does.